I never thought I would be thankful for my great-grandfather's paranoia. But as I watched those bulldozers tear into our family's land that cool September morning, I realized his foresight would change everything. My name is Michael, and that 80-acre piece has been in my family for over a century. My great-grandfather James bought it back in 1920, working 3 jobs just to purchase it. He passed it to my grandfather, who passed it to my father, who finally passed it to me. For 4 generations of memories, 4 generations of heritage. I was having my morning coffee on the back porch when I heard the roaring. At first, I thought it was just thunder, but when I walked over the ridge to investigate, my blood ran frozen. 3 massive yellow bulldozers were carving into the eastern section of my property, with surveyors placing stakes in a perfect pattern. "Excuse me," I shouted, jogging down toward a woman in a tailored blue suit who appeared to be observing. "What exact is happening on my land right now?" She turned, giving me the kind of dismissive glance reserved for unwanted disturbances. "This is not your land, sir. This parcel was approved for development by Westview Estates. We have all the necessary documents." I felt my face flush with anger. "Madam, I am Michael Harrington. My family has owned this entire property for over 100 years. There must be some error." Her smile turned cold as she pulled out her tablet. "Mr. Harrington, I'm Jessica Mills, Executive Director of Westview Homeowner Association Development. According to county records, this eastern section was classified as abandoned property and approved for our planned community expansion. We have completed all the legal formalities." She turned the tablet toward me, showing a survey map that had somehow carved off nearly 30 acres of my family's land. "This is impossible," I said, my voice shaking. "I have the original deed at home. This has always been Harrington land." Jessica's smile did not reach her eyes. "Well, our paperwork says otherwise. If you have concerns, you are welcome to contact our legal department, but I should warn you, we have a team of 15 attorneys who specialize in property law. This development is moving forward." As she walked away, I stood there watching the machines continue their demolition, feeling helpless as they prepared foundations for houses that should never exist. Little did Jessica know, she had just walked her company directly into a trap set by my great-grandfather nearly a century ago. A legal provision so unknown and so brilliant that it would turn their 156-home development into the biggest mistake Westview Homeowner Association would ever make. Where are you watching this from today? Leave it in the comments below, because you are about to witness justice that was literally a 100 years in the making. I spent the next 3 days in a bureaucratic nightmare. First, I called the county assessor's office, where a board clerk informed me that the property lines had been adjusted during a regional survey last year. When I asked why I was not notified, she simply said, "Notices were sent to affected parties," and suggested my mail might have been misplaced. Next, I tried the building inspector's office. "All permits are in order," the official said, without even looking up from his computer. "Westview submitted everything correctly. Maybe you should hire a surveyor if you dispute the boundaries." I even contacted 3 different property attorneys, but each one gave me the same response after hearing Westview was involved. Their legal team is relentless. You are looking at years of litigation and hundreds of thousands in legal fees, with no guarantee of winning. Meanwhile, the construction continued at an intense pace. I stood at the ridge every morning, watching as they cleared more land, poured more foundations. Within 2 weeks, the frames for the first dozen homes were already up. Jessica, the homeowner association director, would occasionally notice me watching and give a small triumphant wave. "You are wasting your time, Mr. Harrington," she called out. One morning, "Our first homeowners are scheduled to move in within 3 months. This is happening whether you like it or not." I was about to give up when I remembered something my father had told me years ago. "The deed to our land has special safeguards." He said great-grandpa James was paranoid about builders trying to steal his land, so he built in protections. That night, I went to the old oak chest where we kept family documents. The original deed was there, yellowed with age, but preserved in a plastic sleeve. I carefully removed it and began reading the dense legal text, looking for anything in common. 3 hours and 2 cups of coffee later, found it. A special provision buried in the legal description, and in language from another time, but with clear intent. Should any person or entity construct improvements upon this land without explicit written consent of the deed holder or rightful owner, said improvements shall immediately and permanently become the sole property of the land's rightful owner with no payment due to those responsible for said unauthorized improvements. My hands were shaking. As I reread the provision, my great-grandfather had not just protected our land, he had created a legal trap for anyone who tried to build on it without permission. According to this legally binding document, every single house Westview was building would automatically belong to me once completed. I called Thomas Green, an elderly attorney who had been my father's companion. After reviewing the deed, his eyes widened. "Michael, this is remarkable. Your great-grandfather was brilliant. This provision was properly recorded with the original deed and remains legally enforceable. Every structure they build on your land becomes your property instantly. So I should tell them to stop immediately, right?" I asked. Thomas leaned back in his chair, a slow smile forming across his weathered face. "Well, you could. Or you could wait. The more they build, the more they lose. If you stop them now, they will just lose some construction costs. But if you delay," I understood immediately. "If I wait until they finish all 156 homes?" He nodded. "Exactly. Every constructed home would legally belong to you. It would be the most expensive mistake in Westview's corporate history." That night, I stood on my porch looking at the construction lights glowing in the distance. For the first time since this nightmare began, I smiled. Jessica thought she was building a homeowner association community. In reality, she was building my future one house at a time. Have you ever had to be patient to get justice? It is one of the hardest things I have ever done. Watching them build day after day on my family's land. But sometimes the sweetest revenge is the one you anticipate. The next 2 months were the strangest of my life. Every morning, I would wake up to the sound of construction, my alarm clock. Now, the beeping of trucks backing up and the rhythmic pounding of tools. What was once peaceful family land was transforming into a bustling settlement that would eventually be mine. I hired 2 more attorneys to verify. Thomas's assessment both confirmed that the provision was legally binding, properly recorded, and had never been questioned or removed. One called it an absolutely brilliant legal trap. Still, I needed to be thorough. I invested in a high-end camera and began documenting everything, taking daily photos of the construction progress, recording video of workers clearly on my property, and keeping a detailed log of every interaction. I even purchased a surveyor report confirming the original property lines, which would be essential evidence later. The construction accelerated at an astonishing pace. Westview was not just building homes. They were creating an entire district. Streets were paved, utilities installed, and home after home sprouted up like mushrooms after rain. By November, the first 30 houses were completely finished, with another 50 well underway. Real estate signs appeared with prices starting at $450,000. One crisp afternoon noticed Jessica giving a tour to prospective buyers, pointing excitedly at various homes and amenities. When she spotted me watching from the ridge, she actually waved them over. "Mr. Harrington," she called out with artificial sweetness, "come meet the Millers. They are buying the Colonial on Oakwood Drive. Is it not beautiful?" The young couple smiled nervously, clearly unaware of the conflict. The house she indicated was a gorgeous two-story with dormer windows and a wraparound porch, built entirely on my land. "Very nice," I said quietly, nodding to the couple before walking away that night. I could not sleep. Thomas's words kept echoing in my head. The more they build, the more they lose. But real families were now involved. People like the Millers, who had no idea they were about to be caught in a corporate disaster. I called Thomas the next morning. "People are starting to buy these homes. Innocent families. Should I step in now before more people get hurt?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Michael, that is a moral question only you can answer. Legally speaking, Westview is causing the harm here, not you. They are selling homes built on land they do not own. The buyers will have claims against Westview, not you, but the disturbance to their lives. Consider this, Thomas said gently. If you stop this now, Westview writes it off as a minor failure and continues these practices elsewhere. If you wait until it becomes disastrous for them, perhaps they will change how they function. Sometimes the best action long-term is not the simplest one short-term. I thought about this as December arrived and the first families began moving in. Christmas decorations appeared on homes built on my land. Children played in yards that had belonged to my family for generations. Each evening light would flicker on in windows. Throughout what was now being called the estates at Oak Ridge, Jessica appeared in the local newspaper, cutting a ribbon at the community's grand opening. Phase 1 is completely sold out, she declared. Phase 2 homes are selling rapidly and we expect all 156 residences to be completed and occupied by late spring. That was when I made my choice. I would wait until all 156 homes were built and sold. The scale of Westview's mistake needed to be huge enough that no development company would ever try this again. Not just here, but anywhere. As winter intensified, I continued my documentation and waited. Each finished home was another piece of my inheritance. Each sold property another example of Westview's negligence. I began researching property management companies. After all, I would soon be the owner of an entire community. Should I keep it as rental properties? Sell the homes individually? The possibilities were both overwhelming and thrilling. Have you ever had to watch someone dig their own grave? That is what those months felt like. Witnessing Jessica and Westview enthusiastically building their own collapse, one luxurious home at a time. And the hardest part was not waiting for justice. It was keeping silent while watching it unfold. By April, the estates at Oak Ridge was a completed masterpiece. All 156 homes were either sold or under contract with residents. In nearly 130 of them, the community featured a clubhouse with a swimming pool, tennis courts, and elegantly landscaped common areas. Property values had already increased by 15%, according to Westview's proud marketing advertisements. May 15th was scheduled as the official community completion event. Westview had arranged for the mayor, county commissioners, and local press to attend a ribbon ceremony at the new clubhouse, celebrating what Jessica called the region's most remarkable development in the last decade. That morning, out on my best suit, the one I had worn to my father's funeral 3 years earlier, I placed the original deed and all supporting records in a leather portfolio, along with the legal opinions from 3 separate attorneys confirming my ownership rights. My hands trembled slightly as I straightened my tie. After 8 months of waiting, today was finally the moment. The ceremony was elaborate. White tents dotted the clubhouse lawn while caterers served champagne and appetizers to elegantly dressed attendees. A string quartet played classical music near the pool. Jessica stood at a stage adorned with Westview's logo, beaming as she addressed the crowd of about 200 people. Residents, officials, and media today marks not just the completion of a development, but the birth of a community, she announced to enthusiastic cheers. Westview is proud to have transformed unused land into homes for 156 families while creating jobs and expanding our region's tax revenues. I stood at the back of the crowd unnoticed. As she continued her speech, she detailed the vision that had made Oak Ridge possible, the detailed planning that had gone into every aspect of the development, and the bright future ahead for everyone involved. And now, Jessica concluded, I invite our county commissioners to join me in cutting the ribbon on this grand clubhouse, the highlight of the estates at Oak Ridge. As officials moved toward the podium, I stepped forward. Before you cut that ribbon, I said loudly, my voice somehow steady despite my pounding heart, there is something everyone here should know. The crowd turned toward me. Jessica's expression shifted from confusion to recognition to shock in the span of seconds. Mr. Harrington, she said quickly, this is a private event. If you have concerns, we can discuss them at our office tomorrow, I continued, walking forward. I think everyone here will want to hear this now, especially the homeowners. The mayor, sensing conflict, stepped forward. "What seems to be the issue, sir?" "My name is Michael Harrington," I announced loud enough for everyone to hear. "My family has owned this land for over 100 years. Westview built this entire development on my property without authorization." A murmur ran through the crowd. Jessica laughed nervously. "Mr. Harrington has some boundary concerns we have been working to resolve. This is not the appropriate place." "It is not a boundary dispute," I interrupted, opening my portfolio. "Westview built 156 homes entirely on land that belongs to my family, and according to this legally binding provision in our original deed, recorded and maintained with the county for over 100 years, any structures built on this land without the owner's approval automatically become the possession of the landowner." I held up the deed, its yellowed pages visible to those nearby. "In simple terms, every home in this neighborhood, including this clubhouse, now legally belongs to me." The silence that followed was shocking. Then came the chaos. Homeowners shouting questions, officials muttering urgently at each other, reporters furiously taking notes. Jessica's face had drained of all color. "That is absurd. Our legal team thoroughly vetted this land." A man in an expensive suit, Westview's general advisor, I would later learn, pushed through the crowd and grabbed the deed from my hands. Scanning it nervously, watched as his professional composure collapsed, his eyes widening. As he reached the critical provision, "Jessica," he said quietly, but in the uneasy silence everyone heard him, "we need to end this event now." The mayor, visibly concerned, addressed the crowd. "In light of these sudden claims, we will postpone today's ceremony, pending clarification of the situation." As the crowd scattered in confusion, Jessica approached me, her calm facade cracking. "You knew about this all along," she hissed. "You watched us build for months and said nothing?" I met her stare steadily. "I told you, on day one, this was my land. You dismissed me and suggested I fight your 15 attorneys. So I let my great-grandfather fight them instead through this deed he foresaw. People like you a century ago will oppose this," she warned. But the uncertainty in her voice was evident. "This provision cannot possibly be enforceable after all this time." Thomas, who had arrived as expected and witnessed everything, stepped forward. "The provision has been legally recorded and unchallenged for over 100 years. Mr. Harrington has 3 separate legal opinions confirming its authenticity. But, by all means, challenge it." I am sure the homeowners who purchase these properties will be fascinated to learn how thoroughly Westview investigated the land titles. As we walked away, leaving stunned Westview executives huddled in urgent conversation, Thomas patted my shoulder. 8 months of patience just made you the owner of roughly $70 million in real estate. Michael, the next morning, my phone rang continuously. Journalists, homeowners, attorneys. By afternoon, the story had spread. "Developers, nightmare. Entire community built on private land," read the headline in the regional paper. Television trucks lined the entrance to Oak Ridge. I will never forget the moment Westview's president himself called, his voice tight with controlled panic. "Mr. Harrington, we need to discuss a resolution to this unfortunate matter." The trap had finally closed. Have you ever witnessed someone's entire world shatter when they realize they have made a terrible mistake? I watched it happen to Jessica that day at the ceremony. The look in her eyes when she realized what she had done is something I will never forget. The next 6 weeks were a whirlwind of discussions, legal meetings, and life-changing choices. Westview's initial offer was almost insulting. They proposed paying me the original value of the raw land, plus a small bonus. Their second offer was better, but still insufficient. By their third offer, they were clearly desperate. 5 times the land's market value. Their president sat across the conference table, surrounded by anxious executives and attorneys. "That is our final offer. $20 million. You sign today, we all walk away." Thomas, sitting beside me, merely smiled. "I believe we have been clear about our terms. Mr. Harrington will accept no less than the full market value of all 156 homes and amenities, minus a reasonable discount for bulk settlement. That is over $60 million. Jessica shouted, her professional demeanor finally cracking. The company would never recover from that kind of loss. I leaned forward. You built on my land despite my warnings. You sold homes you had no right to sell. Now, you are asking me to accept fractions on the dollar for your mistake. What about the homeowners? One executive asked. They are innocent in all this. This had been my greatest concern throughout the process. I have already assured every homeowner they will not lose their homes, I replied. Unlike Westview, I will not punish innocent people for corporate greed. The bargaining continued for hours. By evening, we had an arrangement. Westview would pay me $48 million in exchange for clearing their responsibility and releasing the property rights to the homes already sold. The facilities, clubhouse, pool, tennis courts would remain mine, as would the dozen homes not yet sold. Westview would also issue a public apology and cover all residents' legal costs for deed adjustments. The company was forced to sell off assets and secure emergency financing to meet the settlement. Jessica, I later discovered, was quietly asked to resign. 3 members of their board stepped down within a month. As for me, life changed in ways I could never have expected. After the settlement, I established the Harrington Family Foundation with $30 million of the funds. Our first project was creating affordable housing on another parcel of land. My family owned nearby quality homes for working families at prices they could actually manage. I kept the clubhouse and community amenities, but instead of restricting them to Oak Ridge residents, I opened them to the entire surrounding area for a modest membership charge. The tennis courts now host free lessons for kids from lower income areas. The pool offers senior swim hours 3 mornings a week. The 12 unsold homes I sold 8 at affordable prices to teachers, firefighters, and nurses who could never have afforded to live in such a community otherwise. The remaining 4, which I kept as rental properties for families temporarily displaced by difficulties or disaster. Ironically, I became something of an unofficial mayor of Oak Ridge. Most residents, after getting over their initial surprise, appreciated that I had not evicted anyone or demanded additional payments from them. Many became companions. We hold community events monthly at what is now called Harrington Clubhouse. Last month, I visited the local records office and found the original handwritten notes my great-grandfather had made when creating the deed provision. His words in the margin were simple but deep. Land is legacy. Protect it not just from today's threats, but from tomorrow's as well. When I stand on the ridge now, looking out at Oak Ridge, I no longer see an intrusion of my family's land. Instead, I see my great-grandfather's wisdom transformed into a community that, ironically, I have grown to appreciate. A neighborhood accidentally built by corporate greed, but ultimately shaped by values my family has held for generations. A century ago, James Harrington set a trap to protect his land from those who might take it. He could never have imagined that his foresight would not only protect our family legacy, but would allow his great-grandson to create something meaningful from what began as theft. Sometimes the most satisfying revenge is not destroying your enemy, but transforming their greed into something greater they never intended. Sometimes patience is not just about waiting for justice. It is about waiting for the chance to create something better than what was taken from you. If you enjoyed this story of patience and long overdue justice, check out the playlist appearing on your screen now for more incredible real-life stories where waiting for the right opportunity made all the difference. Sometimes the sweetest triumph is the one you have quietly prepared for generations.